Okay, so next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this food.com small txt file, which holds the 1000 URLs I was talking about. Okay, so I'm going to copy this file and I'm going to paste it into my project. So here inside of my project, I'm going to put it into the modules parser src folder. Okay, good. So now we can close out of these windows. And here we'll see I have my food.com small txt file. Okay, so let's start hooking up this request handler. So actually we need to create this request handler so that we can load up the URLs in this file, and we're going to be loading them up using a queue. Okay, so let's see how this is done. So inside of src, let's create a new Python file and call it food_com, because that's how we called the file here. And here we need to do the same as usual. So from framework.requestHandler import yum search request handler and say class load URLs. Okay, extends off of the yum search request handler, and this will be a def get because we will send a get request in order to load the URLs inside of this txt file into our application. So as I mentioned before, I said that we're going to be using a queue in order to load these URLs into our parser. And now a queue is essentially the exact same thing what it means. So a queue is essentially a place where you keep on adding tasks, and then that queue is being consumed by a worker. And this worker is grabbing tasks from this queue and actually processing the work that's needed to be done. Okay, so the worker is simply processing tasks, so it grabs tasks off of the queue and processes them, and we can actually configure at what rate do we want this worker to grab tasks from the queue, so it can do them quicker or slower. That's all up to us. What this allows us to do is it allows us to have a scalable way of actually consuming this queue, because on one hand we don't want maybe our resources to all get consumed very quickly, so we need to moderate the speed of this queue in order to not spin up a lot of instances that would consume our resources. But as well, when we are talking about parsers, it's very, very important to be very thoughtful and responsible with our queues, because we could potentially set up our queue to parse the websites at maybe, let's say, 1000 requests per second. This would be possible, although this is very, very irresponsible, because you could potentially clog up the servers of the website that we're parsing, and you could maybe even create such a bottleneck on their website that you would potentially, throw their website offline. So this would be really serious, and you never want to do this. Okay, so we need to be really, really responsible on how we use this queue. So let's see how we can read the text file and add the URLs into our queue. Okay, so first thing, let's define our queue. So let's say queue is equal to, and here we need to import, as usual, the library of code provided by the Google App Engine or the Google SDK. And we need to import the library of code which gives us access to queues. So let's say from google.appengine.api import task queue. Okay. So this is again from google.appengine.api import task queue. Okay, and the queue is going to be task queue.queue with a capital Q, and we're just going to give this queue a name. Okay, so I'm going to call it parser. And then next thing we need to do is with open. Okay, so this is a Python function for opening files. Now we need to provide the path to our file. So this is inside of modules, inside of parser, then src, then the file is called food_com_small.txt, and then we need to provide which mode we want to open it up, whether it's reading or writing. So we need to be reading the file, so I'll type R. And then here we need to give it a name, so as list URLs. Okay, so now we can say for URL in list URLs, we can simply create the task. So this will be task is equal to task queue dot task with a capital T, and here we can specify the URL of our worker that I mentioned before. So our worker is still going to be a request handler, that will pick up something that App Engine is going to internally send to itself. Okay, so this URL is going to be the URL that we will map to the request handler that will actually go ahead and parse the website. And what the task queue is doing essentially is it's sending this task to this URL that we're going to send it, okay? So let's say /_parser, because that's the URL that we always have to launch in order for the dispatch to send us the work to do or this request. And then we will say just parse, okay? So parser parse, okay? Now we can send some parameters. So this will be params is equal to a dictionary. And the only thing we will send is that the URL key will have a value of the URL. Sorry, and let's actually type it in singular. So URL instead of URLs. And now the only thing we need to do is simply say queue.add, and we need to add the task into the queue. Okay. So essentially what we're doing here is we're adding a task to our queue called parser, and this task has a URL and some parameters, and the URL is basically telling the queue to send itself a request to this URL with these parameters, okay? So App Engine is going to be sending itself requests at the rate that we tell it, so we're going to be using one request per second. So like that, we're fairly confident that we're going to be parsing our website at 1 request per second, okay? And the parameter that we're going to be sending it is this URL, because we need to know where to go to parse the website, okay?